All right, let's get right into it. Today we're going to unpack a story about technology, a little bit of history, and a pretty radical idea for our future that all starts with a very famous promise. It's really a story about a fundamental choice we face every single time we build something new. Are we building walls, or are we building open roads for everyone?
So picture this, it's 1984. Steve Jobs gets up on stage and he asks the world this question. He's painting this pretty dark picture of a future totally controlled by one massive company, IBM, aka Big Blue. And in this narrative, he sets up his tiny young company Apple as the last line of defense, the only hope for freedom against this all-powerful force.
In the promise? Oh, it was simple, but it was so powerful. You have this young, kind of rebellious company, the classic David versus Goliath story, promising to save all of us from a future of total centralized control. And man, that idea really hit home for a generation that was super wary of exactly that.
And this is how they sold that promise. Their legendary 1984 commercial, directed by Ridley Scott, believe it or not, just perfectly nailed the vibe. It shows this lone heroine running in and literally shattering the screen of a Big Brother figure. The message was clear. The Macintosh wasn't just another machine. It was a tool for liberation. It was a vision of freedom, of choice, of an anti-monopoly future for us all.
Okay, so let's fast forward. 40 years go by, and, well, this is where the story gets a little ironic. It turns out the rebel that promised to smash the system, they ended up building a brand new one. And you could argue it's even more powerful than the old one.
And this is the big twist. On one side, you have that vision from 1984. Freedom, choice, anti-monopoly. On the other, the reality of 2024. A 30% tax on the App Store, a massive walled garden, and a company that became the very thing it swore to fight. In a wild turn of events, the Liberator basically built its own Big Brother, just, with a much friendlier logo.
But look, this isn't just about picking on one company. This is a pattern we see over and over and over again in tech. It goes like this. You start with a revolutionary idea, you build a passionate following, you achieve market dominance, and then, bam, the walls go up. You lock users into your closed ecosystem and start collecting rent. And the root of the problem? The vision was never open to begin with. It was patented, it was copyrighted, it was closed from day one.
So the big question is, right, how do you actually break this cycle? Well, one potential answer is coming from an open-source project called K3D, and its whole philosophy is radically different. It's like, forget about building walls. Let's just build open roads from the get-go.
Their strategy is basically the polar opposite of building a walled garden. Instead of hoarding the core technology, the whole idea is to make it an open standard right from the start. Publish everything, patent nothing, and get it into the hands of as many people as possible.
And this philosophy is really all about future-proofing, stopping that monopoly pattern before it even starts. By publishing everything, you're establishing what's called prior art. Think of it like planting a public flag on an idea. It makes it impossible for a big corporation to swoop in later, claim the idea as their own, and lock it behind a patent. It's an idea championed by activists like Swartz, and it's also inspired by Nikola Tesla's vision of distributed power, creating something that's totally sovereign. That means no cloud dependencies, no vendor lock-in, and zero licensing fees. It just belongs to the community.
Okay, so that's the philosophy. But what does this actually look like in the real world? In the code? Because this isn't just some high-level concept. It's a real engineering blueprint for completely different kind of software. And it's all built around this idea of shared memory.
First up is something called procedural knowledge. The best way to think about it is with a cake. Instead of storing the huge, fully baked cake, which is like a massive video file or a 3D model, the system just stores the recipe. It keeps the super efficient set of instructions to bake that cake on demand whenever you need it. And the difference is huge. We're talking thousands of times more efficient.
Next, all that knowledge gets moved out of these private little black boxes on our computers and into a shared external memory. Now just imagine for a second, instead of just opening a file, what if you and an AI could literally walk into a 3D virtual library together and point to the exact same book on the exact same shelf? That's the idea here, a shared navigable space, not data locked away in separate silos.
And finally, this completely changes our relationship with AI. AIs stop being just features or tools buried inside an app. They become what are called synthetic users, first-class citizens that exist in this shared digital space right alongside us. They become true collaborative partners, operating by the same rules,
all working from the same ground truth.
So, an open, shared architecture. It's a really compelling vision for a more democratic digital future, right? But what does it actually achieve in the real world? Well, the answer is surprisingly concrete, and it has to do with one of the absolute biggest challenges we all face today.
Yeah, I mean, breaking monopolies and rethinking AI, that's one thing, but the impact here is incredibly tangible. It directly tackles one of the biggest challenges facing our planet.
Just look at this number. The potential savings are honestly staggering. If this kind of architecture were adopted globally, it could lead to a cumulative reduction of nearly 13 gigatons of CO2 equivalent over just 10 years. I mean, that's an almost unbelievable figure to come from a software architecture. It's wild.
So you're probably asking, where does a number that big even come from? Well, that massive efficiency gain from the recipe, not the cake approach, helps a lot with video streaming, gaming, and data centers. But the real game changer, the lion's share, is robotics. This architecture enables ultra-efficient robots that don't need to constantly phone home to the cloud to see and think. All that processing happens locally, which saves a colossal amount of energy. And that adds up to 12 of those gigatons of CO2.
To really put that into perspective for you, this single architectural shift, this one choice to build openly and procedurally, could contribute 10% of the entire global carbon reduction the world needs to achieve by 2030 to meet the Paris Agreement goals. That's incredible. One idea could be a tenth of the solution. And that leaves us with this final provocative thought. 40 years ago, the choice was presented as freedom versus control. But maybe today, the real choice is between a closed, proprietary model that's designed to extract value and an open, shared architecture that's designed to create it. So what if that fundamental choice, open or closed, isn't just a tech question anymore, but a question about our collective future?